Joining me on the channel today is Amparo Ortiz, author of the YA novel BLAZEWRATH Games, out now from Page Street Kids. The book is about a girl who sets out to compete in a dragon riding tournament, but finds herself entangled in a deadly international conspiracy. Welcome, Amparo.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so cool.
Yay! I always like to start at the beginning and explore your journey to becoming a published author. What kind of kid were you?
I was really annoying because I was super dramatic in the sense that everything was aggravated. Like, someone would look at me weird and I was like, oh my God, that person hates me, and I would cry. Or I would be running around the whole time. I was that girl, the only girl in my class who would be super sweaty, like but right before homeroom, and like her hair was all messed up. Everyone else looked pristine and beautiful, and I was just, I was really loud, really dramatic, and like I saw myself like lose my time or my entire day like playing with dolls or playing with Barbies, specifically with Barbies. So it's just like I was really imaginative and I was just very loud. Nothing's changed.
I
Nothing
love
has changed.
it. Where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Puerto Rico?
Yes, I've always lived here. I mean, I say here because I'm in Puerto Rico. I've always lived here. I've traveled, but I've never lived elsewhere.
Oh, cool. What's Puerto Rico like?
Right now it's starting to be like colder, which is fine, but cold for us is like 70 degrees or 65 degrees. It's like, wow, this is so different.
Yeah.
Because usually it's very humid, really hot. And I personally love, I'm starting to love the cold more. So Puerto Rico is definitely, we have to talk about the weather first and foremost because we don't get snow here. And, it's usually just a lot of time spent outdoors when we can. And if we're indoors, it's just like fans are always on, like multiple fans. And yeah, it's really like right now it's peaceful because of, everything that's happening. But for the most part, you get a lot of cars like driving by your neighborhood with super loud salsa or reggaeton. I listen to neither, so it's quite the experiment or test of patience for me because it's really loud. But yeah, for the most part, it's just like anywhere else, but the music and the food and like the weather is super different.
Awesome. Well, the weather, it seems like kind of like California. I'm in California, where like if
Yes,
the weather dips below 70, it's like everyone puts a sweater on.
because it's
Like we're
so
not
unnatural.
we're not used to cold at all.
Yeah, it's like really jarring. I mean, I've been to Las Vegas. I've never been to California, but like it's similar in terms of like their neighbors. So like Nevada and California are neighbors. So like I went there and it was like I think 30 degrees once, and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna die." But really it's not that cold.
Yeah, that Las Vegas is a little bit like in the high desert, so it
Right.
gets like a range of temperature. Not so much where I am right now in Los Angeles. It's a little bit more,
It's more like us here
yeah, and more city. But you guys get the nice humidity, so your skin looks good.
for the
We
most part.
get like constant dryness, so
Oh,
every
yes.
like I just feel like a skeleton all the time.
Yeah, but it's like a very dry kind of like burning heat instead of here, which is like you just feel like you're drowning in your own sweat. I know that sounds really gross. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
But it's like, yeah, the difference is quite interesting. I really like that.
yeah. What kind of books did you read as a kid?
None. I actually started reading when I was like in high school. I mean, I read things for school, but nothing really for pleasure because I didn't associate myself or didn't identify as a reader. I would write short stories or poems or songs. They weren't really good. But they were what I was feeling in the moment and I went with it. But I didn't start reading up until I actually left middle school and entered or that like read for myself high school. So it's like interesting because I read like Holly Black.
Mm.
I remember Holly Black's Tithe. I think that's how you pronounce it. That was the first time I saw the F word in a book. Like, and I was like, you can do that? That is so weird. I was so shocked. I actually ran to my mom and was like, did you know that people wrote the F word in books? It was really ridiculous of me, but yeah.
I love it. And so how did you go from like reading Holly? Were there any other authors that you read that you liked?
I did, but I don't remember their names because they were European. They were translations. And
Oh,
I
wow.
remember distinctly, I do remember that there was like, when Twilight happened, that was a huge boom and everyone was reading it. So I was like, oh, maybe I should, also read it. And I ended up really enjoying the darker parts of it, like
Mhm.
Edward's backstory. And I was like, ooh, maybe I'm into horror. And I didn't know it. So I started reading like more darker stuff. And then I just kind of like fell in love with fantasy, contemporary fantasy, urban fantasy, like City of Bones, and then that and more Holly Black. And then it kind of just like progressed into now that I like read almost everything. But like in a young adult and middle grade audience, or for those audiences specifically, I need to get into more adult fiction because I feel like I'm lacking there.
Well, if you like the dark stuff, like have you read any Stephen King?
I have not. Currently, I'm reading Silvia Moreno Garcia's Mexican Gothic,
That
and that's
I'm
really,
looking forward to that.
yeah, it reminds me of one of my favorite books is actually Wuthering Heights because I just love
Yeah,
Gothic literature, and it's
yeah,
just like I don't love the love story, if you can call it that, in Wuthering Heights, but I love how messed up that family is, her family, because it's like, well, essentially it is his family. It's Heathcliff's family as well.
yeah,
But it's just like, that's what I'm looking for, that like family secrets, legacy
yeah,
that is just tarnished somehow, haunted like manors, the moors, fog, that stuff. That's always been like my home for some
yeah.
reason.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting how when you're starting off as a reader, at least for me as a middle schooler, high schooler, like you're into the dark stuff. So
Yeah.
it sounds like you were into the dark stuff too.
Yes, but more in movies because I was more of a like a movie watcher, if that's how you see it.
Yeah.
Because my father actually like raised me on horror movies. Like I remember my first movie that I remember watching is The Wizard of Oz. But I also remember watching Freddy Krueger movies and like Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers. So it's just like all of these classic horror movies, and Hellraiser was huge here as well.
Hmm.
And I'm like, why am I being raised? Like, I'm literally 5, 6 years old, like having nightmares. And the Leprechaun movie was like the first one. That was scarring. Like, I can't even remember why my father sat me down as a child and said, yes, you are worthy of this. It was a lot to deal with. And to this day, I still remember those movies, even though I didn't like them that much as a child. I was like, oh my God. But my real home was fantasy as a child. And so nowadays, even though I love fantasy, specifically fantasy set in our world,
Hmm.
not so much like high epic fantasy, although I'm a huge Lord of the Rings movie fan, I feel like darker stuff, as you say, is like where I thrive as a reader, as a movie watcher or movie goer. Yeah.
Awesome. And so how did you make the transition from being a consumer of media, whether it's reading or watching movies, to wanting to write your own stuff?
Well, precisely during my senior year, there was a very quiet boy in one of my classes. It was AP English, actually.
Mhm.
And I was really sad about taking AP English, not because it was AP English, but because I had to replace drama, like theater,
Mhm.
with that specific course. It was at the same time. So I was like, do I want college credit or do I want to act? I'm like, yeah, I'll get the college credit. And
Yeah.
then the problem was that, like, I didn't love the class itself, but there was this one guy in the class who was like really quiet and he was always writing in the jean notebooks. I was like, what are you writing? Like, the teacher isn't saying anything. Like, what are you doing? And so I found out that he was actually writing a book in those notebooks. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And so I bought some jean notebooks and started
Like
writing my
jean notebooks,
very,
as in it's made of jean material?
it's like the brand,
Oh,
the
okay.
jean brand, like it literally looks like the pants. The cover is like blue like the pants. And I'm
I
like,
think I've seen that. Yeah, I think I've seen, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
they're just like super like strange looking notebooks, not very pretty, not pleasing to the eye at all.
Yeah.
But I was like, interesting, I've never heard of that. So I did it as well. I copied him and I started handwriting my what was essentially my first book, which was basically a Harry Potter ripoff. It was just like a white guy or white boy who was like, actually it wasn't just, it was a Narnia ripoff. It was like he was living in a specific world, and then there was a door to another world, and he had to like solve his grandfather's murder. And I'm like, this is interesting, but like, it's terrible. And I queried agents with that book. Like,
Bless your
I think I
heart.
got 10 rejections in one day, and that was all I got. I'm like, no, I'm never writing again. But essentially, yeah.
I want to know about the quiet boy. That sounds like a meet cute, honestly.
Oh, it was not actually. 'Cause we had a lot of the same interests, but I never spoke to him. I was just like looking at him in the back. I'm like, this is very interesting. He's not paying attention to class. I don't blame him. But like, what is he writing? Because everyone else was just gossiping or like actually paying attention.
Yeah.
But he was just in his own world. And I realized I've always been in my own world, just not in writing necessarily, like long form. Because it was usually just poems, terrible songs, and like the like occasional short story, but like literally like so short that there were like 5 or 6 pages. So I was like, because I love a challenge. So I'm like, I will write a novel. And I kind of completely stole the idea from him of like using notebooks to write an entire novel. And I actually didn't finish it. Now that I think about it, I finished it 2 years after I was in college, and finally decided to sit down and type out the stuff that I had handwritten, and then I just finished it in my computer.
Where is that boy now?
I have no idea. Maybe I should do some Googling. That's actually a great question.
A follow-up video. If you are that boy, if you know where the boy is.
Just find him and tell him thank you. I owe my entire career to him.
I would like to interview him. I would like to know if he's querying.
What happened? Yes, to his book and stuff.
Books?
Yes, I did go to college with another person. He was also writing, but he was like a poet. And I like a couple of months ago, I saw that he was repped. He has an agent and he has a book coming out next year. So I was like, oh, look at that, you know?
Yeah.
And he's from Puerto Rico. Like, it's just interesting to see that there are not a lot of authors from Puerto Rico who are traditionally published. A lot of people self-publish or they publish in Spanish. So the Spanish-speaking market is very different. And I think it was like recently, I'm like trying to figure out like how many people are there here who like publish traditionally, and it's just like a handful of people. And it's, you know, something that I've noticed. So yes, if you know who this boy is or where this boy is, find him and tell him, thank you for my career.
If you were the boy writing in a jean notebook during AP English class.
With a ponytail and no regard for anyone ever.
Contact us. And mad respect for someone who can write while class is going on.
Oh my gosh.
People are gossiping. Yeah. Concentration required.
Yeah. I mean, I did that once in law school because I went to law school. I quit after a year, but I realized that I should have quit like long ago, I can't remember how long I was there until I started just writing in class. And one of my friends was like, you're totally missing this riveting discussion about something. And I'm like, that's boring. That sounds really boring. And I should have known by then that law school was not for me.
Yes.
But I stuck it out a year and I don't regret anything, but I'm just like, wow, that should have been a sign.
Yes. Yeah. I'm glad you pursued publishing instead of law.
Me too.
Can you tell us about the day that you found out your book was going to get published?
Oh, it was August 15th, 2019. I write down the dates of the offers from editors. Yeah. So it was July 15th. Yes, it was July 15th of last year. And my agent called to say that I had completely forgotten that I had a book out because I was on deadline for another book. So this was my first book published, but it was not my first book deal. And the day that I got that phone call, I completely forgot that I had spent 10 months on submission for it because I was super hard at work with a graphic novel that is coming out in 2022. And I was like working really hard. And then I get this phone call from my agent. And I'm like, oh, she's going to like catch up or something. And she's like, Yes, no, because BLAZEWRATH Games, and I'm like, oh my god, I forgot I had a book also. And she's like, yeah, well, you got an offer, and I'm like, are you serious? Because it was like 10 months straight of rejections. It was like, but they were nice rejections. I was like, I like this book. She's very good at writing, but it's just like there's something missing, and I'm like, okay, but what is missing? So that I can work on what is missing.
Yeah.
But we never really got like super concrete or universal feedback. It was mostly like someone liked the world building, someone else liked the characters, someone else liked
Sounds like the story of
everything.
like every submission,
Yeah, it's
every
frustrating.
query or like submission rejection. It's like I'm not connecting with
Yeah,
something, you know, it's a, and you're like specifics. I need the
yeah.
specifics.
I feel like it's harsher when we're querying
Mhm.
because when we're with our agents and or maybe we're just like this is our first book on sub or maybe if it's our 10th book on sub, you will always be nervous in that sense that you want your baby to find a home. But when you're querying, you don't really have that support system within the industry. You have your support system, your critique partners and your friends and your family, but like that barrier between the editor and you is not there. It's just an agent that you hope will want to represent you. And it's harsher, I feel, because it's like, oh crap, like I have to start all over again. And
Yeah,
it's so sad,
yeah,
but it's so
definitely.
common.
I didn't let you finish. So the day you were shocked.
Yeah, I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. And also, it was just someone that Ashley Hearn, they're
Mhm.
no longer at Page Street. They are with Peachtree Publishing, if I'm not mistaken. But honestly, without Ashley, this book would not exist as it is currently because it was just the messiest drafts over and over. My agent helped me polish it. And then when Ashley read it, they were like, oh my God, this is so like up my alley because they have experience within the sports world, like
Mhm.
outside of publishing, sports broadcasting specifically. So not only is like football huge, um, in their life normally, it's also like part of what they used to do before publishing. So it's
Mhm.
like, this is perfect. Like it's a super fit. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I read the other day that my book is like dragon football,
I,
which is great. I love it. I'm going to use it from now on. It's dragon football, guys.
I love it. And so now that you're published, what is a misconception that you had about publishing prior to being published that has now changed?
Oh my God, this is going to make me sound really like uncultured, but I honestly thought you had to live in New York to get published because I'm like, that's where all the agents and editors live. And also, I had no idea that the amount of emails I would get would be not just like people who read the book, it's just like people like asking you things like, can you please send me an arc of this? Or can you please, or your editors, like sometimes they have 1,000 questions and it's a lot of like, you have little time to do it all, is I guess
Mhm.
what I'm trying to say. It's like, this is exciting, super exciting, but it's like, wow, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. So are you getting a lot of emails and contacts from readers?
I get a lot of social media engagement from
That's awesome.
readers. Some of them do email me, but like most of them is like Twitter and Instagram.
Uh-huh.
And I'm partial to Instagram because of course you have your not just like your fan art. I have yet to see like super elaborate fan art, but I have seen some fan art. Just today I saw a mock alternate cover for the book and I was tagged like on the tweet and I was or in the tweet and I was like, "Oh my god, this is like more than I could have expected." And I feel like social media, a lot of people do complain about social media. It does have its downsides, but I personally love how I can communicate with people around the world. This
Mhm.
book is being read outside of the US and outside of Latin America. It's so wild to me. And it's like, hi, I am from the Netherlands and I loved your book. And I'm like, excuse me, what are you doing reading my book? I'm kidding. I love read my book. It's fine. But it's just, jarring to me. It's like, whoa, they read my book in the Netherlands, man. It's interesting.
That's that's wonderful. And so pitch your book. Tell us all about it.
So BLAZEWRATH Games is essentially the story of Lana Torres. She's 17 years old. She is Puerto Rican, but she's part of the diaspora. She lives in Florida and she desperately wants to reconnect with her roots. And so how she thinks that this is possible is by being part of Puerto Rico's BLAZEWRATH team. BLAZEWRATH is a sport that allows dragon riders and their steeds to compete with other nations, but one member of the team does not have a dragon steed. They are called the runner, and their job is to literally run up a mountain, run from dragonfire, but also fight rival members of the team that they're competing, the nation that they're competing against. And Lana is super fast, but she doesn't know how to fight. So that's like one of the downsides for her. But not just that, in terms of like getting on the team. Once she does get on the team, because she gets on the team early on, once she does get her ticket to the BLAZEWRATH World Cup, there's this slight problem in the shape of the terrorist, who is a dragon that's been cursed into human form. And he essentially wants to cancel the cup because he believes that dragons should not be used for sport or entertainment. And if the cup is not canceled, he will proceed to spill innocent blood. So now she's like interested in this global conspiracy that she stumbles upon. She's like, okay, so the sire, who is the terrorist, is threatening to kill people, but why is the cup seemingly not getting canceled? If you're receiving a threat that huge, why are we carrying on? Like something is amiss. So she's like trying to figure out her place as a Puerto Rican girl, but also her place in this entire industry or in this entire world that she only knew about as a spectator and as a fan.
Ooh, very interesting. I'm very excited.
I love that.
I'm just very excited for a YA book about dragons or with dragons.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like it was necessary to like, because I love How to Train Your Dragon. And in the second film, if I'm not mistaken, there's a sport. They're playing, they're flying around. Like some of the dragons are not very good at the sport and others are very good at the sport. They're very talented. And I'm like, what if, something similar to that, but also combining some of the rules and positions in soccer combined with martial arts?
Yeah.
Like, how can we make that but truly represent dragons that we've never seen before?
Yeah.
Like, what does a Puerto Rican dragon look like? Or what does a Scottish dragon look like? What does an Argentine dragon look like? Like all of these other countries that aren't necessarily represented in fantasy. Like we're all quite aware of European dragons and the Russian Smegorinich, which is actually like I was going to say real. I wish dragons were real, but it's truly in Russian lore, or Scandinavian lore, I should say. There's actually a park in Russia that has like stone sculptures of these dragons, and they have 3 heads. So you can literally just walk around the park and see these like beautiful Smegorinich with like their 3 heads, and I would die to be there. And so that dragon is in the book. But I'm like, that's interesting because we're just used to these other dragons, but like that's not supposed to be the only dragon ever. There's no like moratorium on how long you have until you can create your own species in fiction.
Yeah. I love it. And what's your favorite step, drafting or revising?
Revising all the way. Like my first drafts are very messy, disjointed, stream of consciousness almost, and they make no sense. So revising, I just love putting things together, polishing things, making them prettier and better. So definitely revising.
And are you a perfectionist or a chaos artist?
While I'm drafting, I'm definitely a chaos artist. And then when I'm revising, sometimes I'm perfectionist to the point where I feel like no one should see it until I've like edited what I edited. It's like, yes, this is draft 2, and now I'm going to go through it again prior to sending it to my editor, for example.
Yeah.
So it's just like, the first draft is meant for chaos artists to thrive. I know some authors love to edit their first drafts, like as they go back and then they like fix and then they move forward, which I've done for certain chapters, but not the whole book.
Yeah.
It's like, no.
Do you have a huge ego, or are you humble and demure?
I'm humble and demure in the sense that I just can't believe that this is my life now. Because like a lot of people are like really humble. They're like, oh, thank you, but I'm like, what are you talking about? I have a book out? It's like, what, are you serious? And then when I see people like talking about it or like holding copies, and I'm like, oh my crap, like it's real, you know? So I definitely feel like I am humble, not so demure, but definitely humble.
And are you a plotter or a pantser?
For the first drafts of BLAZEWRATH games, I pantsed the entire thing, and it was almost 500 pages.
Oh
So
my.
after that experience, and I've always pantsed my first drafts. And then once I started writing the sequel, because it does have a direct sequel, that one's coming out next, I'm assuming fall, if everything, moves accordingly because of the state of the world. Um, that one was entirely outlined prior to even drafting it.
Mm.
Like I had to submit a very professional synopsis to my house, to the editorial. And I was like, so do you think is gonna work? And they're like, let's revise the synopsis. So I actually rewrote that prior to even like putting the first word on the page.
Mm. And did you like that process where
I did.
you liked it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, now I'm never going back. Like, I'm never drafting anything ever again, like, without knowing where I'm going.
Hmm.
Or, of course, it's a roadmap, it's not like set in stone. So, I do know that a lot of people hate writing synopses and outlines, but just take it like it's just a guide, like a
Hmm.
general way of seeing your story, all the events lined up, all the set pieces together. It doesn't have to stay that way. You
Yeah.
can like remove characters, you can remove plot lines or even places or anything really. It's a playground and you get to play in it.
Cool. I like that. Are you a morning writer or an evening writer?
Morning writer for sure, because in the evenings I like to just chill and watch television
Yeah.
or movies or just read. I love reading at night,
Hmm.
even though it's, hard to keep my attention because I'm usually tired
Hmm.
from teaching and writing,
Yeah.
but I definitely feel like I need to distract myself at night because otherwise I'm just, although if I'm on deadline, I just came out of deadline less than a week ago. So I used my evenings to write as well because I was on a tight deadline. But if I'm not on deadline, I am not writing in the evenings at all.
Are you a character first writer or a plot first writer?
I'm a character first because if I don't know who I'm writing about, then I don't know what choices they're going to make.
Hmm.
And plot is informed by character choice.
Yeah.
Sometimes, of course, other things happen that inform that character's decisions. But I feel like if I know how they're going to react to certain things and what they want, then I know where they're going and how I can develop both them as a character and the plot itself. So
Hmm.
it's like character first. I mean, sometimes I'm like premise is like the first thing that hits me usually. I'm like, what about a story set in, Jurassic Park or something like that? I would never be able to write something like that. So if anyone wants to write the next Jurassic Park, please do so. Also, I think the movie's coming out like next year or something like that, or 2 years from now. Anyway, I'm plugging. Why am I plugging Jurassic Park? Anyway, but yes, I definitely feel like plot should be informed by character. So character comes first for me.
And what is one revision suggestion that you got along the way that has been most helpful for you?
I feel like when you're stuck or when you feel like something you wrote it and it doesn't feel like it lives or it has a like a beat, a pulse, because it's kind of just words on a page and you don't feel anything while reading it. You have to kind of like take yourself into consideration as a person and not just as a writer. It's like what moves you? Like what makes your heart skip a beat? Is it going to be a super tense moment that you just put in there to shock people or shock your readers specifically? That's not necessarily going to be effective. It's going to feel fake and forced. So just take yourself out of it as a writer and think about how would you react in that situation, not your characters. Is this moving you? Are you scared? Are you excited? Are you falling in love? All depending on the type of scene, it's like, what does it make you feel? Is it evoking anything? Because if it's not evoking anything, then you failed as a writer.
Yeah, definitely. Um, was there ever a point where you feared you would never get published?
Oh, all the time. Like when I got my agent, I queried uh 3 different projects. Yes, the third project was the one that got me my agent in 2015. So up until that point, I had been querying since 2009. So from 2009 to 2015, I was querying and not getting anything.
That's
Just getting, like, with that third book, I did get some requests. I got full requests, which had never happened with the other two books that I queried. That was my fifth manuscript that I completed, but the third one I queried. And that's the one that got me my agent. And up until that point, I felt like I was doomed.
Yeah, so you started querying in 2009, like, so that's when you kind of like started in earnest on your like writing career. And then your
Yes.
book comes out in 2019.
Yeah.
So that's like
2020.
that's the 10-year thing that keeps coming up again and again on this channel,
Yeah.
which
I mean, I
is
got my first book deal that I actually haven't announced, but
oh,
at some point it'll be announced. I actually got my first book deal in 2018, and then I got two book deals last year. It was the graphic novel with HarperCollins,
mhm,
and the BLAZEWRATH games came out this year, but it was sold last year. So it was like two book deals in 2019, one in 2018, but like I got my agent in 2015. I
yeah.
was published in 2017, but it wasn't a book deal. I was part of a comics anthology,
Mhm.
and I did it because all of the funds that we were raising were coming into Puerto Rico's hurricane relief efforts. So technically, I've been published since 2017,
Mhm.
but my first novel came out this year.
Yeah.
So it's a wild ride.
Yeah, definitely. But
Mm.
it still fits with like that takes about 10
It
years.
takes so long, and then all of a sudden you feel like everything is happening at once.
Mhm.
Like you feel like I mean, it's been, yeah, a long time with graphic novels. They take a long time, and I'm working on some other graphic stuff, and it's like it takes a long time, so I can't really talk about these things, but I know they're happening like behind the scenes. And
Yeah.
then there's going to be a deal announced soon-ish.
Oh, cool.
That's for like a normal novel. I call them normal, but like what I mean is like a prose novel.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to talk about that project, and there's a lot of stuff that I'm really hoping to write that are not under contract. So I don't know, once you get that spark,
Yeah.
that opportunity, you feel like not like you're invincible, but you definitely feel more energized,
Yeah. I
at
feel
least
like
for
you're on a
me.
roll. Yeah.
Yeah, like you have to be on. And
Mhm.
I know a lot of authors feel like if they don't write, if they don't produce something, publishing will forget them, readers will forget them, or they're not like taking as many opportunities as they should be taking. And it's sad because that's not necessarily true. Like there will always be an audience for you.
Mhm.
You just have to love what you write, because if you're just putting out stuff just to put them out, and like
Yeah.
it's not sustainable, I guess. My
Yeah. No.
advice.
Yeah. I can think of tons of writers who like do have that gap between what they turn out, like Jandy Nelson, like basically she
Yeah.
just has two books and she got started really late, but like everyone's like I will
Obsessed.
pre-order whatever Jandy Nelson comes out with next.
That is
Same with
actually a
like
great example. Yeah. Yeah. Cause like I mean I've been meaning, I think I have Cersei on audiobook, and I'm like, I need to read that or like listen to that soon, because
oh my god, oh,
like
it's my favorite, like Cersei and Song of Achilles are my favorite books of all time, like
well, people love them so much because it's her. Like her talent is undeniable.
yeah.
And it's like it doesn't matter if she, or like for example, one of my favorite authors is Kristen Cashore. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Graceling,
Mhm.
that novel changed my life when I read it. I was like, wow. And I actually found out about it because of Rick Riordan. Rick Riordan was like, everyone
Bless
should read
him.
this book. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll read this book, Rick. I'll read this book. And I loved it, and I was changed. And that book led me to write high fantasy, actually. And that
Mhm.
high fantasy got me my agent. So it's like everything is connected. But just like if you are writing and you're not even agented yet, don't feel like if you do it now, it's never going to happen, because that's not true. You don't know when anything is going to happen.
Yeah, take your time with it, make your work that like the absolute best it can be. The
Yeah.
audience will be there when it's ready. Like
Yes.
you don't have to rush things. And look, our favorite authors do not rush things.
No, not at all. I've noticed.
Hey,
And I think it was V.E. Schwab or Victoria Schwab,
mhm,
The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I think that book had been germinating in her brain for like a decade, or like maybe a little bit less, but it was a long time, and it came out this like year.
Yeah.
So just take your time. It's
Take your
not the end of the world.
Yeah, exactly. Would you ever like to be famous?
I mean, it depends on for why I'm famous. It's like if I'm famous because I'm, like working really hard as a creator or a creative, then great. But if it's because I was caught like standing next to Bon Jovi or something like that, that would be a very strange thing to be famous for.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I've met a couple of my favorite celebrities, as I call them, my favorite famous people. Do you know the show Supernatural?
I am one of the few people, it feels like, who has not watched Supernatural.
Oh no, it's fine. You don't have to watch it.
Okay.
I I like the show. I used to love it passionately, but I've met many members of the cast, and so being like next to people who are remotely like in any degree or to any degree famous is an experience for me because I'm really like I freeze in front of people like that. So I would not want to do that to others.
Hmm. You don't
So
want to
like
make people like nervous around you. You want people
absolutely not.
to be
It's like
like,
I'm approachable.
yeah.
I'm 5'2", so I'm not threatening at all. I've stood next to Jason Momoa, Aquaman, and that was an experience. I felt so tiny. I'm like, wow, I am very small.
Oh, so cute. Height difference couple right there.
Oh my gosh, it was horrifying, but in a great way.
Okay. If you could have any non-supernatural talent or ability, I specify non-supernatural, what would it be?
Yeah. My non-supernatural talent or ability would be to play an instrument because I do not have a single musical talent in my body. Like none. It's so sad because like on my mother's side of the family, there are so many musicians and musically inclined people, and then there's me.
What musical instrument would you like to play?
I've always been a fan of the piano,
Mhm.
but I've grown to love um any string instrument, like specifically the violin. I feel like is one of the most beautiful sounds any human can produce
Mhm.
with instruments is with the violin. But I've always been huge on the piano, and I tried taking lessons as a child, and my wandering mind kept preventing me from learning anything. So it was just like a waste of money.
And what are you working on now? Tell us about your next thing.
Well, I just sent off BLAZEWRATH Games 2 to my editor, so I'm currently waiting for their notes. And right now I'm actually going to start working on two different projects, and one of them is what is known as the option book in a contract, which is a book that doesn't necessarily belong with the house that offered on your previous work, but they are the first ones to see it.
Mhm.
So I did already send in a pitch for that option book, and my editor loved it. And they were like literally the day after we sent the pitch, they were like, "Oh, where are the pages?" And I'm like, "I haven't written them." So now I finally have time to write them, and I'm gonna be sending those off to some very, very unlucky people who get to critique them, and then I will polish, revise, and hopefully send by February, maybe like when publishing is back to normal-ish.
February is a good day astrologically.
Oh, yes,
I'm like,
correct.
I'm big into the astro stuff. February
Oh,
2021 is a good month.
okay. I will take your word for it. I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah. All the craziness that has been 2020 will be officially done by then.
Perfect.
Yeah, expect 2020 to kind of last until January of 2021, but then when February kicks in, February, March, good stuff.
It's
Especially,
better.
yeah, it'll be
Yeah,
better.
my birthday is this month and I'm really excited about it, but I'm at the same time I'm like, because I'm just gonna spend it watching one of my favorite shows.
Yeah.
Wow, what a wild time. But yes, I do think that February, like in general, is just a better month for like post-holiday stuff in like not just in publishing, but like in the world. So I feel
Yeah.
like if you have something really important to share with someone, February is your month.
Yeah, definitely. I feel that way too. Definitely.
That's so exciting. I
Thank
feel
you.
validated.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's gonna be kind of dicey through the rest of the year. So
Yeah.
good luck with your birthday. Just take it
I'm
easy.
not Yeah, no, I'm not doing anything.
Okay, good.
It's like I'm plopping myself in front of the television and just watching the Untamed the entire day. That's it.
Where are you in Untamed? There's so many episodes. I'm just like about like
I
a
finished it
quarter.
like 3 months ago. Yeah. I'm
Okay, so
gonna
you finished the
rewatch
whole
as
thing.
many as I can. Yeah. I'm just
Oh,
gonna rewatch as many as I can that day because it's been a couple of months since I've seen it, but I just feel like it's gonna comfort me, strangely enough.
yeah, it's strangely comforting because of the subtitles. You can't like watch it and do something else, so you have to
Yeah.
just kind of sit down and like focus on it. But
Yeah.
it's such a
It's an
wonderful,
experience. And
it's
it's my
such a
first
wonderful
Chinese drama. Have you
experience.
watched Chinese dramas before?
No, this is my
No,
first
this
one.
is your first.
Well, I loved Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which was a movie that came
Oh,
out like
yeah.
so long ago.
Yeah. It was a while ago. But this one, I've watched K dramas, and because of Korean content, I am used to like reading subtitles.
Mhm.
But this was wild because I'd never been exposed to so much Mandarin before. And I'm like, wow, I cannot pick up a single pattern because my ear is so trained to either Spanish or English or Korean.
Mhm.
I'm like, I really got to learn some basic Mandarin because I am just pathetic. I'm like, wait a minute, I know I can detect a pattern. Even when I'm watching something from Europe, I'm like, oh, I think I know what that word means now. And then when they repeat it and you're reading the subtitles, you're like, but Mandarin is harder,
Yeah, it's a
much harder for me.
whole different thing, whole different
Yeah,
thing. But yeah,
I feel very uncultured. But
the Untamed. We should make a little pitch for anyone watching who's like the Untamed.
yes,
Tell us about the Untamed. It's hard to explain, but tell us your
it's a
favorite
little
thing about.
dicey. Well, my favorite thing is that it follows this, I want to say boy because he does start out young, and it follows him throughout several years of his life. His name is Wujan, Wei Wujan, and it starts out with him being considered what is essentially a dark mage in this world, Imperial China, and he dies at the beginning of the episode. The first episode, he's dead, but he comes back to life. He's brought back to life, and he is basically trying to solve a murder in this new reality like 2 years after, I think it's 2 years after his death. And he is essentially like brought back and he has to hide his identity from everyone who knows him or who remembers him. Actually, no, it's not 2 years, it's 10 years. I can't remember the time lapse. See, this is why I need to rewatch it.
Yeah.
But he comes back and he's like trying to solve this murder, but he's also trying to clean or not clean, clear up his reputation and prove that he was never responsible for something that we learn later on. He's not guilty of something terrible that happened. And he's also confronted with the fact that he is trying to like avoid the one person who means the most to him, which is someone who I don't want to spoil too much, but yeah, it's based on a Chinese novel, a web novel.
Mhm.
And even though the web novel is a little bit more explicit with the gay content,
Mhm.
the show unfortunately is not because, China has different guidelines in terms of what they can
But there's a lot
show.
of longing.
There's so much longing, and there's never a moment where you're like, are they or are they not falling in love? It's quite clear that they are falling in love, but you can't actually see them have physical contact in a way that is explicitly romantic or sexual.
Yeah.
All of that to say, you need to watch The Untamed.
So,
I'm like
yeah.
rambling.
Yeah, my pitch of the Untamed is I had no idea what was happening during like the first 5
Yeah,
episodes,
it's really
but it was
confusing.
really pretty. So,
And the people are also really pretty. I'm like,
oh my God,
wow, so much
every
grace.
single actor and actress
Stunning.
in this show is the most beautiful person. Like,
Alive.
perfect. Like, everyone is so beautiful. And so you can just like watch it because the people are just so beautiful. But the
And their posture.
costumes, and they're just like, they're like slender, long
They're
gowns that
very
they
tall.
wear.
Even
And
like the bad people or the villains, they're so elegant, and I'm so offended. I'm like, this does not happen in the West, man. Like sometimes you watch these shows and the villain is clearly the villain. Like you look at them, you're like, yeah, you're a bad person. And I'm like, we need to change how we do things.
yes.
But
Yeah.
yeah, watch The Untamed, people.
Watch The Untamed. This is a beautiful show. Okay, this has been a fun talk. I want want to get back to
Yes,
the
indeed.
pitching Amparo's book, BLAZEWRATH Games. If you haven't
Yay.
picked it up,
It's
buy
that
links
one right there.
are below. There it is on the shelf. And buy links are below. Follow Amparo on social media. I'll put all that stuff below. Thank you guys so much for being on the channel, Amparo.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun. I mean, I'm always down for a good writing and publishing chat, but we got to fangirl over the Untamed, so it's kicking it up a notch.